afternoon and welcome back to Real Estate Live UK's first week of events for 2021. Real Estate Live UK is a week-long programme of events brought to you by White Label and our partners, including places, developers and property sector organisations across the UK. The programme, which will see 3 weeks of events this year, seeks to keep the property and regeneration sector updated and engaged, and we have a fantastic lineup of events planned this week to do just that. You can view more details on the sessions taking place this week on our website, realestatelive.co.uk, and I'll let you know about some of the others taking place tomorrow at the end of this session. Before we begin our next panel, we will be launching a short poll asking what will be the most significant trend for regeneration professionals in 2021, and we'll be showing the results from this poll at the end of the week. There are a few options on screen now, so please take your time to read through those and submit your answer. And while you're doing that, I'm delighted to introduce our next session on South London's knowledge economy in partnership with Develop Croydon. We'd like to maintain the interactivity levels during this panel, so please do submit questions to the panel throughout the session using the Q&A feature on Zoom. And I'd like to hand over to Lalajee Clay, Director of Education and Talent at London & Partners, who will be chairing the session. Over to you, Lal.
Thank you, Bonnie. And hello, everyone. Welcome to this session. As Bonnie said, I'm Lalajee Clay. I'm Director of Education and Talent at London & Partners, which is the Mayor of London's trade, investment and promotional agency. And it's my privilege to introduce this very distinguished panel to you to talk about South London's knowledge economy. We have Councillor Oliver Lewis, who is Cabinet Member for Culture and Regeneration in Croydon Council. We have Professor Patrick Bailey, who is the Provost of London South Bank University. We have Mimi Neethling-Taylor, who's Head of Higher Education at Croydon University Centre. We have Richard Hoey, who is Director of Communications and Policy at the Institute of Cancer Research. And we have Paul Kirkbride, who's Head of Knowledge Exchange and Partnerships at the South London Partnership. So a very broad range of expertise there. I'm going to kick off by asking each of our panellists a little introductory question so that they can give us an overview of where they're coming from and their particular field of expertise in this area. So if we can start with you, Professor Bailey. London South Bank is expanding as a base down into Croydon. What are the factors that have led you to pick Croydon for your expansion?
Well, Lal, in my 3 minutes, I'm going to give a very quick story, which is that the attraction initially was that we were approached by Croydon Council that there was a building they saw that needed using, that they thought might be appropriate for higher education. And that aligned with LSBU's mission as a community-based university. We were founded in the late 19th century, amazingly, from public donations to meet the needs of professions in the area. Now, that was about 2.5 years ago, and we did a very careful piece of market research, did a very careful analysis of the finances of running a Croydon campus of London South Bank University, and it was just not viable across the range of subjects that we offer on our main campus. So including science, engineering subjects, health, some of the arts and humanities. And we thought a nice mix would work well, but we simply couldn't get the numbers. What we did discover, though, was that there were 2 key areas where there was currently a really significant call in Croydon. One was in health and all of the health-related areas, particularly relating to primary care out in the community. And the second is development of business. So our initial foray, which was driven by Croydon Council saying there was a building, led to the analysis, which led to us saying, where else might we be able to go? And Electric House will now open in September of this year. I think it absolutely meets the mission of London South Bank University of supporting the community in South London and its needs. But the really interesting thing is that the springboard will depend on a couple of key areas, but I see Croydon as having massive potential across the creative areas, across engineering, across enterprise, very, very wide ranging, but this will be the starting point for us, those 2 key subject areas.
Excellent. And so kicking off this autumn, let's hope for a nice big cohort going in there.
The numbers have been very strong. Good start for us.
Good to hear. And you must be pleased to hear that too, Mimi, with your role in the Croydon University Centre, because I know you've got plans for expansion and growth and working with HE providers across the board. So how do you see that benefiting the local community?
Hi, Lal. Good afternoon, everybody. Yes, I mean, I absolutely echo what Professor Bailey's saying here. I think it's important just for the people here today just to reiterate that, you know, Croydon College has been within the area for a long time, and we've been providing higher education for about 30 years now, collaborating with various universities and partners. And we're particularly, our mission also is just to provide higher education for our local residents and people within the borough. To date, about 96% of our students come from in the Croydon borough, which is huge, absolutely huge. You know, people don't like to travel, they like to stay within the area. So that's for us is really, really big drawing card. And I think despite the pandemic, it's a really, really exciting time for higher education and training providers at the moment. You know, our provision aligns really well with the current needs of the residents. Now, Professor Bailey was saying, you know, we also did market research into where are the needs, where are the skills, where are the upskilling necessary. And we've come up with the healthcare provision, public health, nursing, those areas, but alongside that business, we've also doing a bit of leading into the construction and engineering works. There is definitely a growing demand in the market. So we're definitely, as the Croydon University Centre, looking to continuously grow our provision, but also to target exactly where that skills needs exist. And now is really a really great opportunity for collaboration and working together to ensure that all of us can provide this relevant training and educating and upskilling our Croydon residents and the people from within the area. But not only that, to make sure that they stay, you know, within the area, putting that back into businesses and not brain draining them by sending them off, training them in Croydon and sending them off elsewhere. So for us, it's really important, the collaboration, the partnership, and whether that is through collaborative projects, you know, or just as validating partners, whatever the case may be. And I'm pleased to say that there's a lot of collaboration happening between, you know, us university partners, London South Bank, London Met, University of Roehampton, University of Sussex. There's already a great growing, and Paul Kirkbride, who's here today, will also echo that. You know, there's a lot of work happening to make sure that we provide the actual provision that's necessary to upskill the local residents, because there is a genuine need for that. Yeah, and I think just in terms of the benefits of having a higher education provider within the Croydon area, centrally located, especially one of, you know, we're a further education college with a higher education provision, but by bringing more higher education providers into the area really helps with the economic footfall into the area. You know, we as a college and university centre, we bring in about 5,000 students and staff on a daily basis. This is obviously before COVID, but there's a massive footfall into the town centre, you know, and for regeneration, I think that's really, really important that we can, you know, broaden that. And there is certainly demand, like Professor Bailey was saying, you know, there's definitely a demand from the local area. And by bringing the education into the area where the people are is key here, and all of the wonderful collaborations that we're doing behind the scenes.
I'm sure that's right, yeah. And you know, you picked up on healthcare, as indeed did Professor Bailey, and that's obviously something very top of mind for Richard Hoey, working as you do on the London Cancer Hub based out in Sutton. Very close into Croydon. So why was Sutton the location of choice for you? How much did you do to collaborate with the HE providers in the area?
Hi, and good afternoon, everyone. Okay, well, in answering that question, I'll just quickly introduce the London Cancer Hub to you, just to explain really how it's come about, and then I'll give you a quick update in terms of how plans are progressing. So the London Cancer Hub is a hugely exciting long-term redevelopment project, and it's jointly led by the Institute of Cancer Research and the London Borough of Sutton. And our joint vision is to transform an existing campus that exists today in Sutton, South London, and turn it into the world's leading hub for cancer research, treatment, commercial enterprise, and education. And the plan is we want to create a vibrant community of scientists, doctors, and various different kinds of innovative companies, all of course supported by really state-of-the-art facilities. And the ICR is already an internationally renowned cancer research organisation and a higher education institution. Not everyone is aware of that fact, but we are a higher education institution. We're based on 2 sites. One is in Chelsea in central London. There's not very much space for expansion there, but the other is in Sutton. And the idea for the London Cancer Hub came about because although the ICR collaborates extensively with industry, with more than 100 pharma, biotech and medtech companies, it hasn't had the opportunity previously to work closely side by side with companies. And that's just simply because of a lack of space. And it's constrained our ability to do our research in drug discovery to the extent that we could do. And what became clear from discussions with the London Borough of Sutton was that there was a really once in a lifetime opportunity to take advantage of vacant land that exists on the Sutton site, or did exist, to create a hugely expanded and enhanced life science hub, which includes all sorts of space for life science companies. So since then, we've made lots of progress. So the borough invested £30 million on land on the site, which it bought from Epsom and St Helier NHS Trust, and a whole series of new buildings have gone up. So we've got a science specialist school that's been built, a Maggie's Centre for looking after cancer patients and their families, and then the ICR's really pioneering Centre for Cancer Drug Discovery, which is just welcoming its the final tranche of researchers moving into that building right at the moment. And we're working together on a major refurbishment to create what we're calling the Innovation Gateway, which is going to provide incubator and collaboration space for very small companies, startups and spin-outs. And we're also working together to secure various different improvements to transport for the site, because that's going to be absolutely critical if this is going to work and if we're going to realise the vision. So we're working on a business case to twin track the rail line to Belmont Station, which is close by. We've won a commitment to improving bus routes. Ultimately, we'd love to take the tram to the site. And you asked about kind of how we already collaborate. The ICR is already the world's most successful academic research organisation at discovering cancer drugs. And we take those drugs to patients by working with industry. It's essential. It wouldn't happen otherwise. And we think the London Cancer Hub can enable far closer joint working between academia and industry and create what we call an open innovation ecosystem. So that's where knowledge exchange occurs, not just between sectors, so not just between academia and the commercial sector, but also within the commercial sector, within the various different companies that we hope will attract onto the site. And ultimately, we think the London Cancer Hub will greatly speed the discovery and development of new cancer treatments. It's going to hugely benefit cancer patients, and ultimately it can generate up to £1.2 billion annually for the UK economy. So it's, a really very significant initiative.
That's powerful stuff, I must say, Richard. And hearing you talk about transport feels to me like a very neat segue to our next panellist, Councillor Oliver Lewis, who is a councillor in Croydon, and with his particular hat on as member for culture and regeneration. I'm sure you've got a strong opinion on that, Oliver. Just before you start, can I remind people to keep the questions coming in the Q&A, because I know there's going to be a lot to talk about here. Over to you, Oliver.
Yeah, thanks, Lal. Look, it's really interesting to hear the remarks of other panelists so far. And I think, look, in Croydon, we're lucky to be home already to the Sussex Innovation Centre and Croydon College. And we're looking forward to London South Bank joining us later on in the year. Look, we think that Croydon is ideally located for higher education institutions. We're well located and well connected. So we've got this kind of east-west connection with the tram link between Bromley and Wimbledon. And look, I mean, we share Richard's ambition really for that to be extended further, because that benefits Croydon. And we're well connected north and south. We're between the South Coast and central London. And those connections will only get better as things like the Brighton Main Line upgrade come forward. You know, we're a young borough as well. You know, there's 100,000 young people in Croydon, so there's a real market for higher education and a real need for it. And we hope that you know, a more vibrant and diverse knowledge economy in Croydon will really be to the benefit not just of our residents, but also to our businesses. You know, we've got relatively affordable space in Croydon as well. You know, look, I mean, I don't know what the rent is like in central London for higher education institutions, but, you know, Croydon is obviously, you know, relatively affordable in comparison. But there's also, you know, lifestyle and other attractions to Croydon. You know, we've got 128 parks in the borough. So there's a nice balance between, you know, kind of an urban centre and all of these green spaces. And, you know, in a couple of years' time, we're delighted to be the London Borough of Culture as well. You know, when you're looking for somewhere to study, you don't just want, you know, a box where you can attend a lecture or you know, read through a book. You want other things you can do as well. And, you know, we hope that really helps to drive this knowledge economy and contributes to our ambition to be a creative campus. And like I said, you know, we think that can bring benefits not just for residents, but for new and existing businesses as well. And we want to work with our partners to take this forward. So I think it's an exciting time for Croydon, and we look forward to you know, other partners and institutions coming in and you know, working with us to create an exciting future.
It's really good to hear. And I must say, it's always been a bit of a mystery to me why Croydon hasn't had a university of its own. So it's great to see all this progress. And moving on, last but very much not least, to Paul Kirkbride of the South London Partnership. Well, I'm sure I was about to say a few words about what the South London Partnership is, but I think I should leave that to you, Paul, and tell us about how important it is to growing the region's knowledge economy, and in particular how the partnership working that you embody is helping bring that about.
Yeah, thanks, Alan. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm glad you left me explaining the South London Partnership to me, because that's one of my 3 minutes. The South London Partnership is a partnership of 5 of the South London boroughs: Richmond, Kingston, Merton, Sutton and Croydon. Working in partnership, they look at how they can advocate for the needs of South London, how they can look at seizing funding and policy opportunities, and how they can make connections and networks across the South London area, which is an economy, as you know, as everybody in the room will know, about 36 to 38 billion pounds a year. It's a bigger economy than Birmingham. It's a bigger economy than Manchester. And yet traditionally it has punched below its weight. So just for kind of, you know, because context is king, just to explain that the South London Partnership commissioned a piece of work from Oxford Research, which is Oxford Economics Research, which is going to be published this week. And it's looked at the impact of COVID on the South London economy and done some long-range forecasting for what that means in terms of economic recovery. We're staring down the barrel of a 12% fall in GVA within this next 12 months. We've lost, as a region, 11,000 jobs in 2020. We're going to lose an additional 20,000 jobs in 2021. And the challenges that are facing the South London economy are largely linked to the fact that we have dominance of low productivity, low GVA industries across the region. And when you actually look at those sectors that are low productivity, low GVA, they actually perform worse than other low performing sectors in low GVA sectors. So there's a real challenge there in terms of stimulating the business base. And by business, I use business in all its definitions: private sector, public sector, third sector, and community sector as well, to kind of engage with the knowledge base across the South London region to be more innovative, be more creative, invest more in things like such as R&D, and kind of structured interactions between our university and college community and the business community. And that's where the South London Partnership at the end of last month, at the end of January, launched a new initiative called Big South London, and the Big stands for Business Innovation and Growth. And this is a collaboration between the 5 borough councils and 6 of the on-patch South London universities. So LSBU, obviously with Professor Bailey, with Roehampton, with St Mary's, with the University of Sussex and Croydon, and also with Kingston and the University Arts and their site in Wimbledon. And essentially what we're looking to do is to support knowledge-based economic growth across the sub-region. by helping local businesses that might have traditionally low levels of R&D and collaboration, awareness and engagement with the university sector to improve their productivity by contributing and collaborating in various initiatives and programs which improve that level of collaboration and ultimately drive up the productivity of the businesses in terms of competitiveness, in terms of productivity efficiencies, which ultimately then result in better, higher quality, higher paid jobs for the citizens of South London. And that's where the link between innovation and skills is absolutely key. If the analogy always is, if you want 10,000 doctors next week, you should have started 10 years ago. So if we are going to invest in building relationships between the university community and the business community, we also need to make sure that we're linking that then through to long-range skills planning to ensure that our people in South London can move into those jobs as and when they come online. And what we should say as well is here, we're not coming from a zero base. There is a lot of highly innovative, highly entrepreneurial, highly passionate and creative people and organisations working in South London now at borough level and indeed across the entire patch. And obviously, the Institute for Cancer Research and London Cancer Hub is right up there amongst it. So it's about bringing that network of organisations together and doing even more, even better for the benefit of the residents and the business community in South London. And I think, that's where when Richard was talking about ecosystem development, ideas don't respond to or actually recognise geography. They recognise place. And therefore we have to ensure that as at the South London level, ideas, information, people, resources can move seamlessly across that ecosystem, landing where they need to land for their stage of development, working with who they need to work to advance that stage of development, but retaining that concept of South London being a fantastic place to live, to work, to study and succeed.
Yeah, that's great to hear, Paul. Thank you very much. Well, we're starting to get some questions through. That's fantastic. Just got a great one come in from Natasha Gray. Mimi, you said that 96% of students came from within the borough. I must say, I found that a really interesting statistic. Is there any available information on the number of London South Bank students who relocate versus live at home, and how far they travel to extend? I think this is my day job is with international students, and the whole question of commuter students, how far you travel, what it means to be 5 miles away from your university or 15 miles away from your university, I know is a really key one. So both Patrick and Mimi, I'm very interested in your comments on this question.
Yeah, I think, Lal, if you don't mind, Professor Baby, I'm going to just jump in there before I'm going to give you an opportunity to speak. For us, it's, Oliver has touched on that as well, the very young population that we have within Croydon and within the borough. Our niche market with the Croydon University Centre is really mature students. But at the same time, we've been seeing younger and younger students from within the borough who don't want to travel, who don't want to incur that additional travelling cost, accommodation cost, even if it is to go to a central London location, it all adds up at the end of the day. And I think that's where it comes into, we're bringing the education to the local people, which is really lovely because we have a young, thriving population coming up. Certainly our students are more from the southeast. And then definitely within the borough, and it's been increasing and increasing. We do have small numbers of international students, but I'm sure Professor Bailey they probably have a much larger international cohort, and with the fantastic transport links within Croydon, I think that will open up that market even further for us, in terms of bringing them in, bringing LSBU into as a campus on Croydon, and there's certainly demand. So yeah, I don't know if you wanted to add anything there.
Well, I mean, it's interesting, Mimi, that you might have given that angle as being slightly special for HE in FE, but actually that's very much true for LSBU within the university sector. So about 80% of our students are local students. Local doesn't mean that they're within walking distance of the university, so it's not immediately adjacent in the way that some campus-based universities elsewhere in the UK might be. But the vast majority of them live within easy commuting distance. But the other factor that's really important, and we're exactly the same in this regard, in supporting the local community, many of our students, the majority of our students are mature students, interestingly, and a huge percentage of them, one of the highest in the UK, have multiple factors that make studying in continuing their education really, really challenging. So many of them will have will be first to university, first to study at higher education level. Many come from over 55% are from BAME backgrounds. And statistically, that has an impact on their success. Many of them will be supported, will be carers in one way or another, either children or parents that they will be caring for, a huge percentage. And I was utterly shocked on the statistic of the percentage of our students that work at least 20 hours a week in order to bring in enough money so that their family can survive and that they can carry out their studies at higher education level. So for all of those sorts of students, having local university is really, really important. And Croydon isn't very far from LSBU, but it's quite an extra burden for a student who's having to care for their parents and having to go to a job as well. If we can provide a local university, a really local university for them, then it makes a huge difference. And we are finding, I mean, it's been mentioned a few times now, but healthcare is particularly important. We've talked about cancer care. We're all aware of the impact of COVID. But actually, there is a bigger and bigger pressure on general well-being and the care for people, the health of people in the communities. So this is not just talking about training nurses. This is talking about social care workers. It's talking about those who will be assisting those who are at home. It will be talking about those who can diagnose in a local medical centre a whole range of illnesses. All of that makes an enormous difference to a local community. So I think that we see it from a very similar lens, in fact, Mimi, that the mission of our institutions is to make sure that those who've got additional challenges have got a place nearby they can go to that will provide the additional education that they need.
Absolutely.
Thank you. We've got a question that's come in about the businesses that you'll partner with in the immediate future from 2021 from this year onwards. But I'd like to sort of pull that into a slightly larger question about how it is that you go about making sure that the skills that you're providing are linked into jobs in the community, because acquiring skills is a worthwhile thing in its own right, but many students want to feel that they're going to lead them to a job that they want to do. And as we've just been discussing, for many of them, that will ideally be a job very much within the local area. So Paul, I don't know if you'd like to kick off on this one and what you do to work with business to make sure that the skills are really relevant to local people.
Yeah, well, I think the first, thank you, Lal. I think the first thing you have to recognise is that the on-patch universities and the colleges and indeed the training providers do a tremendous amount of work already with businesses. This is actually happening now. It's not that we have to create something. The networks that colleges have in terms of the employer placements, the people that are taking workforce development training within their colleges, the collaborations that the universities have in terms of R&D, in terms of student placement, in terms of use of facilities and equipment and indeed academic expertise. We're not coming from a zero base in any of this. I think where we sometimes struggle is communicating and engaging with businesses. And I think where sometimes businesses struggle is actually communicating effectively and consistently what they need, and not what they need just next week or next year, but what they're going to need in the long term. Because ultimately, as Professor Bailey will give testament to, you can't just turn out an undergraduate degree in 2 weeks. It takes time to develop that curriculum to ensure that it's robust, that it's fit for purpose, ensure that it's attractive to the students who would wish to study on it, not just to the employers who wish to employ people. So there is that whole kind of a pipeline between what business needs and then how the education ecosystem responds to that. And hopefully by investing in activities that are working with businesses on looking at research and development activities, innovation activities, business resilience activities, will gather even more intelligence into the ecosystem, which will enable the universities and the colleges and the private training providers to plan more long-term, building on those relationships with local sub-regional employers. Now, the data that we have from our Oxford economics research suggests that there are 5 or 6 sectors that have the potential to be significant sectors of growth across the South London region area. And some of these will be no surprise in terms of construction, in terms of medical, life sciences and health and allied healthcare professionals, looking at creative and cultural, and the vital role that that sector will play post-recovery in terms of mental health and well-being and people re-engaging with place and re-engaging with community, but also interesting ones like financial and professional services, to a certain extent, the invisible sector, and also interesting emergency sectors such as fintech, and how that then intersects with data, digital, machine learning and AI. So there are some really interesting sectors that have the potential for growth across South London, that already have kind of world-class areas of research and academic endeavour within our on-patch universities, and high calibre, high quality, accessible and affordable courses within our local FE colleges. It's how we bring that together and consistently communicate it to the business community, again, in all its definitions, and actually work with those key sectors to develop long-term strategies for skills development and investment, which means we're not playing catch-up again.
That sounds bang on to me. I don't know if Mimi or Professor Bailey have got an additional comment. Or...
Yeah. I mean, Paul is absolutely right. If we identify, Paul, a need for a particular skill set now at degree level, and degree level is expecting people to solve complex situations, to bring in different skills in order to solve a problem. It's not just a training in being able to do a very specific skill set, but those higher level combinations of skills that we need to develop. If we launch it today, the first graduates will come out in just over 4 years' time. And that's assuming we get accreditation just immediately like that. And that might not be the case anyway. So it is quite a challenge to identify what the needs are going to be 4 or 5 years down the line, persuade the students that those are the courses they should be doing, because the need might not be there, so they might not see it as being the right opportunity just now in order to deliver the needs. The construction sector always say that they are 5 years out of cycle. I think they run on something like a 7-year cycle of boom and then real challenges, and then it picks up again. But the training, they always say, is out of sync. It's really, really difficult to get those matched up. But just quickly, Lal, to mention 3 very fast things. Almost all of our courses, but not all, but most of them are professionally accredited. And Mimi, I think will almost certainly the same will be true. You know, all the nursing ones are NMC, Nursing and Midwifery Council accredited and so on. And that is really important. So they're coming out at the end with a qualification that is recognised within that particular sector. That's extremely important. We've lots now, 2,000 apprentices. So these are students who are in employment but studying part-time for a qualification, part of which they get through studying with us and part of which they gain through the practical experience of the job that they're doing. So all the nursing associates are now pretty well going through the apprenticeship route. So nursing has very much switched over to this twin track, which is a very nice alignment of industry with education. I think, Paul, the one thing you might comment on that's a real challenge for those is small and medium enterprises. The big industry, big companies, NHS, they've got the infrastructure to support that. Much more of a challenge for the smaller companies, of which there are lots. And then the last thing I would just put in a plea for, not to this audience, but to politicians really, is that people moving into jobs that earn them lots of money and can be tagged as graduate is great. But communities need people that are going to be creative in the arts, are going to be increasing the well-being of people without necessarily earning big salaries. So even though we try and mainly train people who will move into professions, I would put a very strong case that society needs a whole range of different people who will contribute in different ways to the well-being of everybody in our communities.
I'm sure that's right. And of course.
Yeah, if I can come back in on that, thank you for queuing that one up, Patrick, because it's a perfect tee up, which is, yeah, the vast majority of micro businesses, owner-manager businesses for the last 12 months have been concentrating entirely on two things: keeping the lights on and paying the bills. So to get them to engage in a discussion about long-term strategic workforce development is a pretty goddamn hard sell at this moment in time. So you have to make the intervention much more about how can you improve their business resilience, their business performance now, then in terms of building those relationships for much longer term development. So how you engage through organisations such as the Chambers of Commerce Network, which are very strong in South London, how you engage through the Federation of Small Businesses to get to those owner managers who quite frankly need the help. And that help is immediate. And I think to throw one back to Patrick, but no doubt he can pick up later, is there is a challenge then back to the education sector, I believe, to move away from traditional delivery models of learning into more innovative, short-term and responsive products that businesses want the quality, they want the involvement of the university, they want micro-credentials at postgraduate level, they want to work with colleges and know that what they're investing in terms of workforce is quality, but they can't afford the investment over a 3-year or 4-year part-time postgraduate qualification. So the challenge there, and you know, this is what the government is now turning to look at with the Lifelong Education Commission, with the Skills White Paper, is how can we empower the education sector to evolve and to change and to offer quality product in slightly different ways. And I think both sectors, both HE and FE, and I think the division sometimes is unhelpful, but both HE and FE, in the way that they have responded to the COVID crisis, in the way that they have revolutionized how they teach almost overnight, demonstrates the capacity that these organizations have on patch to be innovative, to be creative, to be resilient, and to be responsive. And it's our responsibility, I think, as the rest of the ecosystem, to ensure that we're not just supporting businesses to innovate and be creative and be more entrepreneurial, but we actually support our colleagues in the education sector to do that as well.
I'm sure that's right. And it's interesting that we've strayed slightly into political areas. And we had a question as well about sports and leisure facilities. Although it's primarily addressed to Professor Bailey, I'm going to ask Councillor Lewis to comment first on this. Marjan Musavi asks, what sport and leisure facilities are included in the plans for the new campus in Croydon? And is it just going to be for students and staff, or is it to benefit the local community? What's the plan for local community usage? So I'm sure that's something that Councillor Lewis has got an opinion on. Well,
look, yeah, I mean, sports and leisure are part of my portfolio on Croydon Council. And, you know, obviously across the borough, we have 128 parks, for example, and you know, a number of those are within easy reach of the new LSB campus, but also Croydon College and other higher education institutions in the town centre. So, you know, within those, there's lots of opportunity for free activity, whether that's you know, a trim trail or using the tennis courts, basketball courts, whatever. You know, I think that it's a real benefit that Croydon has, that, you know, in times when people are kind of cooped up inside because of lockdown and all that kind of stuff, there's actually a lot of green space where when you can get out, when we are able to socialise again and all that kind of stuff, we are able to get into these green spaces, enjoy them, refresh our mental health, really, you know, benefiting us not just in the workplace, but also, you know, in the academic classroom as well. So, but, you know, also across the borough, you know, look, we've got a number of leisure centres and sports facilities that are publicly accessible. Just like we've got 100,000 young people. You know, Croydon has previously been called the concrete Catalonia. You know, a lot of young footballers coming up are from Croydon. So there's obviously, you know, lots of appetite for physical activity, for the use of sports facilities. And you know, you can go on the council website and see, you know, exactly where they are in relation to your place of study. But, you know, just as we're well located to other parts of London, there's good transport in and around Croydon as well. So most of those facilities will be relatively accessible for most people.
So it sounds like the increasing range of facilities which are perhaps sponsored originally by universities should contribute to the availability of facilities for everyone in Croydon. There should be a community benefit for that.
Absolutely. Look, I mean, you know, there's public facilities, but there's also private facilities that are publicly accessible, and you know, it's all part of that that health and well-being mix that we want to encourage in for our residents and for people who are you know, in the borough for one reason or another.
And talking of health and well-being, we've had a question about student accommodation, which is I think a perennial for students in London, something that is always expensive and in high demand. Richard, you've got a lot of very specialist people who will be studying with you. Is accommodation something that is on your mind?
Well, we don't actually provide accommodation for our students. So our students are all accommodated in the private sector because we are a specialist higher education institution, as you mentioned. And so our students are a combination of PhD students, MD Res students who are kind of clinicians who are studying, you know, clinical focused, essentially PhDs, and then also master's students. And those master's students are all professional doctors who are training in oncology. So it's quite a different situation from the, you know, the undergrad student accommodation picture. You know, most of our students are therefore, you know, relatively mature at a later life stage. Many of them have families, and so they will be living in and around Sutton, but in the community.
But Patrick, it looked like you had some thoughts on accommodation. You of course will have, of course, as we've been discussing, many of your students will be living very close, but not all of them. So where does accommodation factor in your plans?
We have around 1,200 students living in accommodation out of 18,000 in total, and clearly a lot of them, as they are part-time and in work, that's the base that they have, so they wouldn't need separate accommodation. The specific question in the Q&A box was about providing accommodation for students on the Croydon campus. And that's a really interesting one, because that would be my vision, that the success of the Croydon campus, starting with a couple of key subjects and then expanding. So we would have a limit in the accommodation that we've got at the moment in Electric House of about 2,000 students that we could accommodate, possibly more for a reason I'll just mention, Paul, in a moment. But in terms of them studying full-time or courses that are degree courses that part-time, about 2,000 students. But if the courses are a little bit bespoke for Croydon, which is the intention at the moment, and start to get the national recognition that we hope they would to match what is happening on the Southern campus, then I would like to think 10 years down the line that the university in Croydon is one that people want to come to from around the country. They can see opportunities, they can see exciting placements that they can have through apprenticeships, for example, coming down, taking a job there, moving into student accommodation. I would see that very much as an opportunity. And it links into an earlier question on sporting facilities. There isn't space in Electric House for us to provide all of the specialist facilities for things like chiropractic, the nursing suites that we've got, some of the computer suites. We don't have space in there for sporting facilities, but we do on the Southern campus. They're all being revamped at the moment, in fact, some great new facilities, and they are open to the public as well as to our students. And I don't know, Ollie, what the best way of providing the range of things are, but I have always been of the view that universities should be an integrated part of the community. And if the best way to support our students is for them to use facilities that are available to the public more generally, that's absolutely fine. And if the best way to run things is for us to make facilities that we develop for our own students open to the public as well, that's also fine. That's exactly what we should be doing. We should be working in collaboration for that broader wellbeing agenda, of which the sports facilities are just one component.
I just echo that, Lal. Absolutely 100% what you're saying, Patrick, there. Ourselves with our campus, we have a relatively small campus, and, we're a mix of further education and higher education. So within our campus, we are looking to kind of include some sporting facilities, but again, it's small. And if we can work as a group together, whether it's through Paul's initiatives, or through, just all coming together and making greater use of what's already in the area. And, through Councillor Oliver, highlighting where these spaces are for there's such a big mental health drive here. And we shouldn't forget that, we're all in this pandemic together. We need to come through it. We need to be supporting our local students and their general mental health, our mental health. Everybody in the community needs to benefit as a whole. And I think just by sitting here, it's so wonderful to just listen to what everybody's doing on their own, but also together, because we all share the same kind of strategic objectives, and building up and reinvesting into Croydon and into the local area. And I believe there's such a lot of opportunity here. But just, keep the conversations flowing and keeping these projects and collaborations going. And I think that's really key. And that will benefit the community tremendously.
Absolutely. Just seen a very interesting question come in, which is quite close to my heart, this one, that of course it's one thing to get people into university, it's another thing to qualify them. And then there's stage 3, which is getting them out and into meaningful jobs and supported to go into those jobs and succeed in the jobs. So the question from Montrose Bab reads, is there a specific cohesive focus or programme to address the big challenge of developing a route map to success for the youngsters to better equip them as they progress into adulthood? Who's got a point of view on that?
Shall I pitch in with something very quickly? We've been working very closely with, and it is now part of the London South Bank group, Lambeth College. So Lambeth College is now within LSBU group. And there are 2 academies that we work with as well. One of them focusing on engineering, one a university training college, technical college rather. And the principle is to develop much better the links through every stage of the education. So, it genuinely isn't that we want to take a 13-year-old and direct them to go to the university and end up with a master's degree from LSBU. It isn't that, but it is.
Although that's good. Yeah.
Well, it would be great. Sorry, yeah, I'd love them. But it's more that at every stage they see what the opportunities are. And included in that will be many who see a possibility to go into further education or into higher education, go off to do a job, and then after a couple of years think, do you know, when I was talking to Mimi, she really inspired me about that, because I went and did X because other commitments meant I needed a job, or I thought it wasn't for me at the time. But to make sure they're aware of those possibilities. And we keep talking about pathways, and pathways for me is not that you are stuck on a path, but that you see sorry, this will sound really corny, but you can see the different roads that you can take at the different stages. And you may choose to go off on one particular road, but you are made more aware of the other ways that you can develop your skills and come back for further training. Because so many people will start off in one job and one career area where they are skilled, and the majority will have taken half a dozen jobs with, at the end of that, probably a skill set that looks totally different from the one that they started with. So having the confidence you can go back into education. And Paul, I said I was going to comment something a little bit more about meeting the needs of industry. The nursing and healthcare courses we're running are exactly the same as the ones at the Southwark campus, because we can launch those immediately and they're validated and so on. But the business ones are almost certain to be a really interesting mix of CPD short courses targeted at the very specific needs of industry. So being able to do that, I think, gives extra opportunities for people to get back into education, whatever level that's at, and sometimes to pick up a particular skill, and sometimes to remind them that actually maybe I should go and do something that's going to be a little bit more demanding, take a little bit longer. Those short courses, I think, are really important within the mix. Mimi, I guess you'd agree with that from your standpoint.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you've touched on a very valuable point there, Patrick, in that, we tend to forget that, a university degree, an undergraduate degree, isn't the be-all, end-all to get you into that top job. There are various different routes you can go. And it all kind of contributes to kind of align your pathway, and whether or not you zigged when you should have zagged. The beauty of this is that, we're here, you can come back into education. Our current student cohort is typically mature students as well, and there are a time in their life where they can go, actually, do you know what, now's the time for me to do that degree, or now actually I'm already in a work, maybe I should do an apprenticeship, and that's really, really important to kind of align it all together. And whether or not we then put them through postgraduate programs, that's fantastic, but it's meeting the students through the journey. And you're not always going to get the young people straight into higher education either. It is about providing them perhaps with a little bit of work experience beforehand, and then they go, yes, actually, light bulb moment, this is where I want to be, whether it's a nurse, whether it's in the financial industry, and how best do I get there? I always say to my students, when I interview them to come onto courses, I say, what's the end goal? Where do you want to be? Because this might not be the way to get you there. Let's look at all the different opportunities to get you there. And again, just by working together and, our pathways leading to progression, pathways over at LSVU or wherever it may be, that's really, really great opportunity for our local residents as well. And continue that agenda of lifelong learning. I'm all for lifelong learning. You can always learn and upskill and retrain. It's really fantastic. I've said this the other day. I said it's a fantastic time to be a student. It honestly is. There's not a lot of jobs going at the moment. Retrain, upskill yourself. Re-educate. Now's the time to do it, and it's great.
That's
it's a great time.
True. Yeah. But Paul, it looks like you've had.
Yeah, just come in on that, Lal. I think the CIPD has published some research today that they've surveyed about 2,000 SMEs, and 56% of those firms are now planning to hire people within the first 3 months of 2021. And those that were planning redundancies, the percentage has dropped from 30 to 20. So there are some green shoots there in terms of, where there is challenge, where there is crisis, to take Churchill, there is opportunity that must not be wasted. And I think what Professor Bailey said there is a challenge to the business community of South London as well, which is it's not for FE colleges and universities to merely issue things down from high, this is what we are going to do. It's a responsibility of the business community of South London, and indeed all the different communities of South London, to engage with universities and colleges to tell them what they think, and that isn't just a one-off, one piece of research interaction that might happen every 10 years. But that is an ongoing dialogue based on a much more multifaceted approach between academia and industry, or academia and the community. And that's where that fact that ecosystems are populated by people, not organizations. And it's about building those networks to ensure that flow of intelligence is both two-way and is also ongoing and continuous. And I think that's the challenge, particularly when you're dealing with a 38 billion pound sub-regional economy that dwarfs Birmingham. But let's use that enthusiasm, that innovation, that creativity that came together, forged through the crucible of COVID, and maintain that into the post-economic recovery period. Particularly, one of the things that we're very interested in is that whole issue of inclusive innovation, the equi-covery, how we make sure that when we build back better, we build back better for everyone. And universities and colleges have been bastions of social justice, widening participation, social equality for decades. And no institutions are better served and better placed to look at some of these issues than the education sector.
I'm sure that's right. That brings me to it's a very nice link to my final question, because I'm keeping a very close eye on the time. We've literally just got a couple of minutes left, but I'm very struck listening to all of you that none of this happens by accident. All of this needs planning. All of this needs a guiding hand on the tiller. And it feels to me that South London's got a got a guiding hand on the tiller, that people are thinking very hard about this happening in a strategic way and not just plonking things down and hoping for the best. So that makes me feel very positive about it. We really do literally have maybe a minute each, less than a minute each, just to say quickly what it is about South London that makes you think it's a fertile soil for this this kind of regeneration. Maybe Councillor Lewis, you could give us a quick word on that, and then Richard after that.
Yeah, look, I think the best thing about South London is our people, and we've talked about our young people, but we've got an amazingly diverse and interesting population as a whole, and that only brings benefits and positives for our borough. Obviously, there are challenges ahead, but I know that the people of Croydon and beyond are resilient and excited about some of the change that is coming to the town. And we hope that working with partners will be able to facilitate some of that change and drive it forward. And everyone will feel a little bit of the benefit.
Richard.
Yeah, I think it's really important to recognise the level of expertise and excellence that we have in certain areas. We've talked about healthcare and medicine and medical research, and I think certainly in Sutton, it's not just the ICR. There's also the Royal Marsden next door, which is an internationally recognised cancer hospital, and that can really help to attract businesses into the area because they want to sit right next to expert academic and medical institutions. So I think that's probably the single most important thing that I'd stress.
Great. Patrick or Mimi, did you have a closing point?
Yeah, I echo kind of what everybody's been saying here today. I think we're all singing from the same hymn sheet here. Definitely in terms of collaboration and that greater piece of collaboration, keeping in touch and just making sure we're all doing it for the same greater purpose. And I think we are. I think we're all here to kind of get boosting the economy, looking out for our local residents, growing in the areas where we can really identify that market is and the needs are. So absolutely, collaboration for me is key here. Thank you.
I have absolutely no doubt that education in general, higher education and research are absolutely aligned in their missions with what is important for Croydon. But the two words that I would pick out that I see in the people of Croydon, which says this is somewhere that we want to come, are the words creativity and hunger. Hunger to succeed, not I hope, not hunger for actual food, but hunger to succeed and a sense of creativity in the community. And those are the two things that I think are most important in terms of its future and the role that higher education has to play in that.
Great to hear, yeah. I'm just going to wrap us up fairly quickly as time is marching on, but it's been fascinating for me to listen to this. And I picked out 5 words that seem to be recurring again and again. Locality and localism, this matters, that things work on the ground for people who are living and working and hoping to study in that particular place. It's very tied into the streets, the buildings, the transport, all of that kind of thing really matters. So locality is important. Community and ecosystem is another theme I picked out. And when I'm talking to international students, one of the great selling points for London as a whole is the fact that you can walk out of your front door in London and you can bump into, within a couple of miles, you can bump into world-class experts in your specialism. And it does create a kind of unique buzz in London. And I think what we're looking to do is to create the same thing in South London, where there is an ecosystem of people feeding off one another, sparking off one another, and creating that sort of space where people want to be and want to learn and want to grow. Space is obviously important. We're in a real estate conference. It obviously really matters that Croydon's got the space where you can put these kind of things, because Bloomsbury's pretty full right now. And finally, economics. If we get this right, this is a massive economic boost for the area. Students, they come, they live, they work, they shop. All the things are massively important. So let's hope we can really make that work. And just rushing to get in, I'm going to hand back to Bonnie. Thank you very much, Bonnie.
Thank you, Lal, and thank you very much to our panel for what was a really timely and I think exciting discussion. As a South Londoner, disclaimer, I'm absolutely looking forward to the continued growth of our education provision and my own continued learning. So yeah, a great discussion, and thank you all for joining us. Looking ahead, audience, we would be delighted to see you at some of our other sessions this week. Specifically tomorrow, we have some brilliant discussions taking place, and the details of those are now on your screen. We have a London keynote kicking us off first thing with in partnership with London Square, who obviously have a big development in Croydon. So for many of you listening, that may be of interest, and will be introduced by Tom Copley, Deputy Mayor for Housing. We're also then moving forward with sessions looking at Orpington, Harlow and Gilston, and the growth of the agri-tech sector, which is a UK-wide panel, and I think is going to be really exciting to hear. So definitely tune in for some of those. And yeah, so I hope you can tune into some or all of those, and thank you for joining us today. We look forward to seeing you again during the week. Goodbye.